Most people think the loudest part of a divorce is the screaming. They expect shattered vases, thrown wedding rings, and threats shouted across a courtroom. But they are wrong. The most dangerous part of a divorce is the silence. When Mark Vance handed his wife Elise the divorce papers, he expected a war. He expected her to fight for every cent of the empire he thought he built. Instead, she picked up a pen, signed her name without looking up, and walked out. Mark thought he had won. He thought she was weak. He had no idea that her silence wasn't a surrender, it was a countdown. And when that countdown hit 0 on the tarmac of Teterboro Airport, Mark was about to learn that some ex-wives don't leave with alimony. They leave in a Gulf Stream. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Vance & Compey building smelled of stale coffee and expensive leather, a scent that Elise had grown to detest over the last 5 years. Outside, the New York City skyline was gray and weeping rain against the glass, matching the somber mood of the lawyers gathered around the mahogany table. Or rather, the mood Elise's lawyers were supposed to have. Mark sat at the head of the table, checking his Rolex Daytona every 30 seconds. He tapped his fingers on the glass surface, a nervous tic he had developed whenever he felt he was the smartest person in the room. Next to him sat Tiffany, his executive assistant, though everyone in the tri-state area knew she was the reason they were sitting here today. She was wearing a dress that was inappropriate for a legal proceeding and scrolling through Instagram bored. Let's go over this one last time. Mark's lawyer, a pit bull of a man named Sterling Archer, no relation to the agency, just an unfortunate coincidence of ego, slammed a thick binder shut. Elise, you are waiving your right to the primary residence in the Hamptons. You are waiving your claim to the stock options in Vance Logistics. You are accepting a one-time cash settlement of $50,000 and retaining ownership of the 2018 Honda Civic. Is that correct? Elise sat with her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple beige cardigan and minimal makeup. To Mark, she looked exactly like the woman he had married 6 years ago, a quiet, unassuming librarian he had met at a charity gala. He had chosen her because she was safe, because she looked at him with adoration, because she didn't ask questions when he stayed out late, closing deals. "That is correct," Elise said softly. Her voice was steady, devoid of the tremors Mark had expected. Mark scoffed, a jagged sound that cut through the room. "Elise, really? You're not even going to fight for the dog, or the artwork." "I don't want the art, Mark. It's all modern prints you bought to impress your investors. They have no soul." Tiffany snickered, hiding her mouth behind a manicured hand. "Soul doesn't pay the bills, sweetie." Elise turned her gaze to Tiffany. It wasn't an angry look. It was the look a scientist might give a bacteria culture in a petri dish, mild curiosity mixed with pity. "No, Tiffany, it doesn't. But neither does Mark usually. The company has been leveraging debt for 3 quarters. I hope you're good at budgeting." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Just sign the damn papers, Elise. I have a flight to catch. We're celebrating the IPO launch in Paris." "Ah, yes, the IPO," Elise said, picking up the heavy fountain pen. "Going public. The dream. You wouldn't understand high finance, Elise." Mark sneered, adjusting his silk tie. "You've spent the last 6 years organizing bookshelves and baking bread. You're lucky I'm generous enough to give you the 50 grand. Consider it severance pay for a mediocre marriage." Elise's lawyer, a quiet man named Mr. Henderson, whom she had hired from a strip mall firm, looked like he wanted to object. Elise silenced him with a subtle touch to his forearm. "Mediocre," she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. "Okay, Mark." She uncapped the pen. The sound of the nib scratching against the paper was the only sound in the room. Scratch, scratch, scratch. She signed the divorce decree. She signed the non-disclosure agreement regarding the company's internal affairs. She signed away her claim to the penthouse, the cars, and the life she had supposedly built with him. She capped the pen and slid the papers across the mahogany table. "Done," she said, standing up. Mark grabbed the papers, checking the signature as if he expected her to have written, "Go to hell," instead of her name. He grinned a predatory showing of teeth. "Well, that was easier than I thought. I honestly expected you to cry." "I cried when I found out you were sleeping with Tiffany 3 years ago," Elise said matter-of-factly, gathering her purse. "I cried when you missed my mother's funeral to play golf. I don't have any tears left for this, Mark. I just have relief." Mark laughed, standing up and wrapping an arm around Tiffany's waist. "Relief? You're walking out of here a middle-aged divorcee with a Honda Civic and no job. I'm walking out a CEO about to ring the bell on Wall Street. But sure, you keep your relief." He tossed a set of keys across the table. They slid and fell off the edge, landing at Elise's feet. "The keys to the apartment. You have 24 hours to vacate. Tiffany wants to redecorate by Monday." Elise bent down, picked up the keys, and placed them gently on the table. "I moved out 3 days ago, Mark. The keys are yours." She turned and walked toward the door. "Hey, Elise," Mark called out, feeling the need for one last jab. "If you need a reference for a library job, let me know. I know people on the board." Elise paused at the door. She didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Mark. Enjoy Paris. I hear the weather is unpredictable this time of year." She walked out. "God, she's pathetic," Tiffany muttered, nuzzling into Mark's neck. "She's history," Mark corrected. "Come on, let's go to the airport. The world is finally ours." Teterboro Airport in New Jersey is the playground of the elite. It is where the 0.1% go to avoid the indignity of taking off their shoes at TSA checkpoints. However, even within Teterboro, there are levels to the hierarchy. There are the charter flyers, people who rent a small Cessna or a Learjet for a few hours. Then there are the fractional owners, people who own a slice of a plane. And then there are the whales, the ones who own the heavy iron, the Global 7500s, the Gulfstreams. Mark Vance felt like a king as he pulled his rented Cadillac Escalade up to the curb of the charter terminal. He wasn't a whale yet, but with the IPO launching next week, he felt like one. He had chartered a mid-sized Hawker 800 for the trip to Paris. It wasn't the biggest plane, and it would require a fuel stop in Iceland, but it was private. That was all that mattered. "Babe, look," Tiffany said, pulling down her sunglasses as they stepped onto the tarmac. Is that Elise?" Mark froze. He squinted against the harsh afternoon sun. About 50 yards away, standing near the entrance of the VIP lounge, was a woman. She was wearing a trench coat, dark sunglasses, and a silk scarf wrapped around her head, reminiscent of 1960s Hollywood royalty. But the posture was unmistakable. "It is," Mark muttered, confused. "What the hell is she doing here? Did she follow us?" "Maybe she's stalking you," Tiffany gasped, clutching his arm. "She wants to ruin our trip." Mark straightened his jacket. "Not on my watch." He marched over, dragging Tiffany and their Louis Vuitton luggage behind him. As he got closer, he saw Elise standing next to a pile of vintage leather travel trunks, the kind that cost more than a car. She was checking something on a sleek, transparent tablet. "Elise!" Mark barked. She didn't jump. She simply turned her head, slowly sliding her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose. Her eyes were cool, amused even. "Mark, Tiffany, you made good time," she said. "What are you doing here?" Mark demanded, gesturing around the exclusive tarmac. "This is a private airport, Elise. The Greyhound bus station is in Newark." Tiffany giggled nastily. "I'm traveling, Mark, same as you," Elise said, tapping the screen of her tablet. "Traveling with what money?" Mark laughed incredulously. "I just gave you 50 grand. A charter flight to anywhere costs half of that. Are you blowing your entire settlement on one flight to where, Florida?" "Actually, I'm heading to Europe as well," Elise said. "Europe?" Tiffany stepped in, looking Elise up and down. "Honey, you can't afford Europe. Not the way we do it. We're flying private. You're probably looking for the employee entrance to clean the bathrooms." Elise smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It didn't reach her eyes, but it sharpened her cheekbones. "I'm not flying charter, Mark," Elise said softly. Oh, right, Mark mocked. Did you find a sugar daddy already? Is that it? Some old geezer taking you for a spin? No, Elise said. I don't need a daddy. I have a brother. Mark paused. You don't have a brother. You told me you were an only child from a farm in Nebraska. I told you I was raised on a farm in Nebraska, Elise corrected.